President Trump struck a nerve with the liberal media once again.
We will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country. The threat from outside forces is far less sinister, dangerous, and grave than the threat from within.
And now, as a result, they are comparing Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler.
Of course, it's Trump is a Nazi time again.
Let's deal with Hitler, okay?
I don't think it's hyperbolic to say that. I mean, that is Mussolini, Hitler-like language.
Trump's affinity for Hitler was always covered under an umbrella of his stupidity.
Echoing Hitler's words.
Listen to this. Well, Hitler was duly elected.
That's right. Echoing the hateful rhetoric of Adolf Hitler.
It echoes Hitler.
That's the kind of language Hitler used in Mein Kampf.
About vermin and Hitler and Mussolini.
That's a horrifying clip. That's a fascist clip.
Just going full on Hitler.
From Hitler's Germany.
We just need to say, for the record, that the term vermin was really effectively used by Adolf Hitler.
Echo dictators like Hitler.
With language evoking authoritarian figures like Adolf Hitler.
Adolf Hitler.
Donald Trump parroted the autocratic language of Adolf Hitler.
Talk about the brilliance of Hitler's generals.
Correct.
General Kelly, yes.
Correct.
That Trump is now a dangerous hybrid clone of Mussolini and Hitler.
I will get to the Hitler.
Basically saying that language is straight out of Adolf Hitler. And
An ignorant person, when warned that Hitler used to call Jews vermin, would stop.
Using the language of Hitler and Mussolini, and there was a lot of coverage of that, Britt. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Trump's turning up the volume.
No.
Well, I don't see Hitler and Mussolini.
The Trump enjoyed the idea of being compared to Adolf Hitler.
Very similar to how Hitler established full power.
Headline: Trump calls political enemies vermin, echoing dictators Hitler and Mussolini.
It's not hard to tell when the mainstream liberal media has a particular talking point given to them by the White House or the three-letter agencies, if I may say. The fact they're repeating the same thing is already telling you that they are up to something, or they've been given a talking point and they're supposed to just say exactly what they were told to say. Now, the truth is there is a history of anti-Semitism to the word itself, the word vermin. It has been used against the Jews. But to say that's what Trump meant by saying that is a stretch. This is kind of like what they do with the implication. They not only smear or taking things out of context, but they go even deeper by applying motive to a person's word without actually taking into consideration what was the nature of the statement and what were the reasons why he said it. Now, Vivek Ramaswamy did an excellent job talking on behalf of Donald Trump here, defending Trump, and drove the mainstream liberal media out of their minds. And I want to watch this video with you and bring this thing to an end.
I want to ask you about before I let you go. Over the weekend, I just want to play this from what President Trump said to his supporters.
We will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country. The threat from outside forces is far less sinister, dangerous, and grave than the threat from within.
That language, they live like vermin. Do you believe that that is, as your Republican colleague Chris Christie has said, neo-Nazi rhetoric?
This is a classic mainstream media move. Pick some individual phrase of Donald Trump, focus on literally that word without actually interrogating the substance of what's at issue.
The word was chosen for a reason.
We are in the middle of a cultural war in this country.
Well, you know what? It's
actually describing a series of behaviors. You have Antifa and other related groups that have been burning down cities for the last 3 years in this country.
Would you describe them as vermin?
Wildly violating the rule of law. We have an invasion on our southern border. We have millions of people crossing our southern border. Let's talk about the substance of why we have to recognize that we're not in ordinary times.
Would you use that language yourself?
The vocabulary of the vermin or not is not what's important. Well, I haven't used that language. So you can look at my track record on the campaign trail. I talk about the issues. We all talk about them differently. But what I'm not going to do is play some game of focusing on some word that somebody else said without ignoring entirely the substance of what we're actually talking about. A border crisis of historic proportion. Economic stagnation we haven't seen in 50 years. A national identity crisis and a loss of national pride in the next generation that's potentially existential for this country. Let's talk about our dependence on China. Today we're actually talking about Xi Jinping, picking on Donald Trump's word vermin to talk about that status quo. You know what's vermin? What's running around San Francisco on a given day before Gavin Newsom cleaned it up on a dime to roll out the red carpet for Xi Jinping. If he could do that for Xi Jinping, he could have done it on an ordinary day, and yet we're here sitting talking not about the substance of that, but on one word that Donald Trump said in some speech in Miami. This is what's wrong with the mainstream media. Focus on the substance and let's have an actual policy debate rather than talking to a presidential candidate instead of the policy substance of what's actually going on in the country, picking on some word that Donald Trump said on a certain day and asking me for comment on it. Give me a break.
Look, Mr. Ramaswamy, the former president saying that people on the left live like vermin in this country, that's a pretty substantive thing. And the word choice was not accidental.
He chose it intentionally.
He repeated it on social media. And I think it's important for us to talk about it. But we appreciate your time tonight. Thank you very much for joining us.
I think it's important to talk about the substance of it. Thank you, Abby.
Well, she didn't get what she was looking for from Vivek Ramaswamy. And again, this is the blaming game that's going on here. The idea that they're consistently looking for ways to apply motive to Donald Trump's and looking for a reason to call attention to something that Donald Trump might be saying that doesn't sit well with them. Again, Donald Trump has been known for saying what he thinks, right? And for you to apply, to make that connection from the fact that he used this language, and you say, oh, well, Adolf Hitler used this language against the Jews, therefore Donald Trump must have an issue with the Jews, anti-Semitic rhetoric. But how could you say that? Because Trump is one of the main supporters for, actually was the strongest supporter of the Jews. It goes as far as Trump doing more for the Jewish state than any other president I could think about. So to make that connection is kind of like, really? Like, come on, man. You're stretching this matter. And again, what we got going on here is this idea of blaming, and the left plays this game, right? They like to make it look as if the very thing that they're blaming Trump of doing, oftentimes they themselves are guilty of doing it. So it's a form of projection. And oftentimes they will compare Trump to white supremacists, Adolf Hitler, and all these different things, even though there's very little evidence for it. Absolutely no evidence whatsoever. But they will run with this rhetoric because the goal is to make people afraid of Trump. The goal is to make people see Trump as orange man bad, right? It's the worst thing that ever happens to us, but is he really? And I think they are terrified because Trump is winning big time. And they just don't know what to do with themselves. The left is covering themselves. In order for them to keep covering themselves, they have to place the blame on somebody else. And for example, when you look at the Bible, the story of Adam and Eve is a good example of how this happened. Here is Adam having fallen, right? Having done the wrong thing. Instead of taking ownership of his being responsible of his own thing, he placed the blame somebody else. And that notion has been this way ever since, right? The woman who is thou givest me, she gave me of the tree and I did eat. So this idea of blaming somebody else for your poor decisions is the common thing. And you see, Donald Trump is like the scapegoat upon which the left will throw out all their vitriol instead of them being responsible and accountable. Like Vivek Ramaswamy said, point out a number of things that the left has been responsible for and they have not held themselves accountable. The second issue here we have is that there is this desire from the left to find something wrong with Trump and to promote that as the ideal of the Maga base, which is not really true. But here is the thing. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. So this idea of learning to be swift to hear, which really implies the fact that we need to listen a little bit more than to jump into conclusion too quickly. Why? Because the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. What we just watched here was the media playing the propaganda machine, looking for reasons for us to look at Trump in a negative light even more than what they've been doing. And it's sad because they don't seem to understand that the average guy, the average American person, sees the rhetoric, sees through the shenanigans, sees the propaganda machine doing exactly what it does best, which is always looking for ways to brainwash the masses, seeing Orange Man bad, instead of allowing the people to reason things out for themselves. They are trying to put thoughts in your mind and cause you to hate Trump so that, well, they don't want him to win. But I got bad news for you. Trump's poll is better than ever. I mean, we got videos coming up. We got a live stream coming on Wednesday, so we're going to spend some time talking about some of that. I'll tell you what, God's will be done. That's where I'm at when it comes to this. Anyway, link in the description below. Like and subscribe to the page. Click the bell icon for more. Stand with us as well, since YouTube has demonetized the channel. But we're not going to stop talking. We're not going to stop preaching, because we have a purpose to live. I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one. Bye.